Tonight we're going to talk a little bit about how to evaluate a 1AC. And this is a one-page document that kind of gives you some tips or steps to go through when looking at a 1AC to see whether or not you think it's going to be a good case, or if you're in round, to look for holes in it when you're debating. There's times you'll be in a debate round where you don't have a really good neg brief or don't have a neg brief, and all you have to go off of is looking at their own evidence, their own case, their own 1AC for the affirmative team, and using your logic and reasoning. So here's some things that you can do auditorily and then visually when evaluating a 1AC. First of all, listen for what the value of the round is while they're talking. Is there something they're trying to uphold or a major goal for the round? Is it, cost-benefit analysis, or is it upholding human dignity? If they don't state some type of a value for the round, then as you listen to the round and you begin to formulate your negative strategy, try to think of what your value would be. Are you trying to instead uphold human dignity, or uphold justice, or uphold fundamental human rights, or constitutional rights? What would it be that could be the value of the round for the negative team? Second, as soon as the affirmative team is finished reading their 1AC, the negative speaker goes up for cross-examination and should initially ask for a copy of the 1AC and pass it back to their partner. That partner would then evaluate it using this visual checklist. Check your evidence dates. Make sure you check the evidence and read the unread sections. Make sure it doesn't contradict. Make sure you check your mandates. Make sure they have the authority to do what the mandates state, that they're clear. Does it clearly explain how much the plan is going to cost, that there's clear funding, adequate funding? Will it be expensive, too expensive? If they're not very clear about all of these facts, you want to bring those up as potential harms. You can kind of lump them under the concept of an unclear plan. Could the plan cause harms in other areas of the prisons, to the guards or the inmates? Is there an end date in the plan? Will the mandates actually solve the harms, or are they just mandates, but they don't actually solve the harms? And if they potentially solve the harms, does the affirmative team have any proof that they will solve the harms? Is the timeline realistic? Has any evidence been read that indicates it will work? What possible negative harms could come from the mandate? And is it enforceable? Also look at the advantages and check the last 2 to 3 sentences of the 1AC. Does it make grand claims that can't be substantiated? Also think through, is there any possible harms that this case might create? Now, when you're looking at a potential case, I just pulled one up from one of the source books. I think it's maybe Ethos, but it's about citizenship desegregation. And what this case is about, in essence, is criminal alien requirement prisons. So basically, if someone is a illegal alien and they're put into a federal prison, they're put in these special prisons called car prisons. And so they're a little bit slightly, the case is about them being ran slightly different. And the major harms that the case brings out is that non-citizens in federal prisons are not receiving drug and alcohol treatment or access to job training that regular federal prisons are receiving. And so that's what they're kind of calling as a harm. One of the things I want you to notice is Emma Kaufman is one of their sources, and you'll see her name repeatedly. So when a case has multiple pieces of evidence from the same person, it's just something to be aware of, that there's, maybe there's no one else backing up the case. Here's another time Emma Kaufman's mentioned. Another thing here is, in this piece of evidence, the fact 3 non-citizens are denied drug programs and job training. The BOP officially bars any prisoner subject to an order of deportation from participating in its most intensive 9-month residential drug abuse program, as well as from its compensated job training program, Federal Prison Industries. So it's saying that if someone's going to be deported, then the prison isn't letting them participate in residential drug program and the Federal Prison Industries. Well, are there other drug programs or other job training programs? And then you might ask the question, like, why would we train prisoners for jobs when they're going to be deported? It would be kind of pointless. If they're going to be working in a job in the United States, that job may or may not be in the country they're deported to. It talks here about, in other words, non-citizens are categorically denied from many treatment programs. Notice the word many. Are they denied from all or many? How many? What are the other treatment programs that are available? These would all be questions you might ask in cross-examination to get to the bottom of that. If some treatment programs are offered, then it may not be a significant harm. So just some other things to look at. For example, in this piece, the ACLU, it was information about car prisons in 2014. And if you know your history, we know that there was a surge of prison inmates. And I believe around 2012 or 13, it began to gradually decrease. So it talks here a little bit about mistreatment and abuse. And when there was overcrowding, they were putting prisoners in kind of like solitary confinement areas. Well, if we know that there was overcrowding, but that's been rectified, then it may not be a significant issue. So that would be something to bring up. Anyway, this is just right here. It talks a little about every year government releases thousands of people it previously ordered removed. And it's talking about using rehabilitation is costly. Not all prisoners subject to deportation are actually removed from the United States. Some successfully fight their deportations. So just because the government releases thousands of people, it doesn't mean that they're all federal prisoners. You would want real evidence of how many federal prisoners does the government release back into society. And if the affirmative team doesn't know, that would be problematic. So anyway, look through your evidence, look through the 1AC, look for possible harms, look at the mandates. Again, here, access to necessary funding will be taken from the general appropriations. We know that the U.S. government is running at a deficit, and there isn't extra money in the general appropriations. The other thing about this, it says the Bureau of Prison will allow undocumented prisoners access to drug treatment and job training programs, that no convicted federal prisoner may be housed in a facility that does not offer these programs. How much is this going to cost? Do they have numbers of estimated costs? Earlier in the brief, it tells us that there's 18,000 prisoners in these prisons. How much is it going to cost to begin to offer drug treatment and job training programs in all of these prisons for these 18,000 undocumented illegal aliens? And how are we going to fund it when our current budget is already at a deficit? So these would be good ways to argue the case, possibly by just evaluating the 1AC. I would recommend that you pull this brief out and do your best to read sourcebook cases and look for the holes.